So you and I live in the same city where we are breathing this poisonous air, and most people that you will speak to, they just have lost hope that anything will be done by our lawmakers, and they just feel that it's now final court of appeal. It's up to the Supreme Court to do something about the matter. They pin their hopes only on the court. What do you have to say on this matter?
Well, it's great that people have this kind of faith in the court system. But I think when we deal with issues such as pollution in Delhi, the fact that, everybody's talking about it for a change in the last several years is part of the answer to the problem. Because the real problem arises when people just accept whatever happens in society as a new normal and they don't speak about it, they don't write about it, they don't talk about it. The very fact that everyone is engaged on this issue itself is the first step in finding a solution to this
But
problem.
it's a very pressing issue, right?
It
It's
is, of course.
So, writing about it, reporting is something that everybody has been doing for a long time. It somehow doesn't move people enough.
Now, the point is that there are two different aspects of the matter. First, you have the role of policymakers, namely the government, the expert agencies of the government. And then you have the role of the courts. None can, in that sense, be complete without the other. When courts step into this area, obviously courts cannot take over the core policy making role, which is for expert agencies to handle. What courts can ensure is to ensure that the processes are being undertaken. Are you applying your mind to this? For instance, we had the graded action plan. Now, that was introduced as a result of the intervention of the court, in the sense that then we lay down processes and systems that if pollution crosses a certain level, these are the steps which you have to
Yeah,
take.
the grab
And
one, grab two, and
that's
all
right.
those. Yeah.
So you institutionalize processes, and the response to pollution does not become ad hoc.
But do you think it's time to have more judicial intervention? Otherwise, somehow the legislature and the executive seems to be doing. They don't understand the urgency of the matter, probably. I don't understand.
Well, I would love to say yes, because I've been a judge all my
Yeah.
life, as especially after I ceased to be a lawyer for the last 24 years. But having been a judge, I also understand the limits of a
Yes,
judicial review,
I get that.
and it's very important for judges to understand the limits of their function. Because what happens very often is that when you step into a problem, particularly a problem as complex as this, which is not a problem relating to one source of pollution, like say one thermal power plant or one polluting industry, those are typically areas which courts can work on very well.
Right.
But you are dealing with a problem which has multi-dimensional issues involved. You have farm fires, you have the number of vehicles in the city, you have new construction, you have changes in cropping patterns, climate change in general as
Yeah.
well. So these are issues in that sense which are extraordinarily complex. So courts have to step into the
Yeah.
area, move the authorities along, and tell them, hey, what are you doing? What are the steps that you are taking to deal with today's problems? What are you envisioning for the next year? What steps do you want to take? So, very often, the role of judicial review is to push things along as opposed to merely taking decisions on your own. Another problem, I think, which we need to understand is that when courts take decisions, we are essentially not accountable to the people in a direct sense. Obviously, we are accountable to the Constitution as judges. And pardon me for saying we, I'm no longer a judge, but just, old habits die hard. But so courts are not in that sense either accountable to the electorate or to the people at large. We, as judges, they perform roles of, enforcing constitutional rights. Now, a lot of good work in the environmental area in India has been done by the judiciary. I'll just take you away a little bit from the immediate issue of pollution. So, doctrines such as the polluter pays principle, or the principle of sustainable development, the precautionary principle, the principle of intergenerational equity, which means that we hold the environment in trust for future generations. The right to be protected against climate change, which I spoke of in one of my recent judgments on solar power. These are all the result of judicial evolution. And the Supreme Court of India has been at the forefront of global Supreme Courts in leading the march of environmental law. So, at a conceptual level, courts have a wonderful and a significant role to play. When it comes to dealing with individual problems, I have some element of caution which I must express. Because otherwise, what happens is when courts enter into the area, there's a great expectation of people that, well, now the court has entered this area, you have this great power of contempt, and that everything will be normal and everything will be fine. It's not going to happen that way because these problems are extraordinarily complex. You're dealing with intractable problems. You're dealing with the issues of farmers, right? The farm fires, for instance. Now, are courts capable of dealing with the complexity of these modern problems? Which is not to say that courts should not enter into the area. We have to enter into the area.
Whether it is Yamuna pollution, whether it is the air pollution, every time people of the city complain to the local government, they say, ye LG ka kaam hai. You complain to the LG and he says that the state government doesn't do it. And then there is the central. This overlapping of Delhi. We are orphans, Delhiites. Who does one go to? What is the solution to this issue of Delhi?
Delhi is the national capital territory. Now, when Delhi was given statehood, it was given statehood with a difference. In all other states, the legislative jurisdiction is distributed in 3 lists of the Constitution. So, any other state in India, there are 3 lists of the Constitution. The Union list, on which Parliament can exclusively legislate. The state list, in which the state legislatures can legislate. And the concurrent list, in which both can legislate, but Parliament has the overriding prerogative to even override a law which is enacted by the state legislature, unless it has been reserved, unless the state law has been reserved for the assent of the President. So if the President assents to a state law, then it can prevail to that extent even over a parliamentary legislation. So far as Delhi is concerned, though it is a state with a legislature, the constitutional position is a little different. In the sense that Parliament has the power to legislate on all the 3 lists in relation to Delhi. So Parliament can legislate on the parliamentary list, the union list. It can legislate on the concurrent list. It can also legislate on the state list. Second, certain specific subjects in the state list are carved out of the jurisdiction of the legislature of the national capital territory. So in that sense, Delhi is what we in law we call sui generis, which is unique. It is a state, but it is not a full state in that sense.
Why didn't you resolve this issue when you were the Supreme Court Chief
Well,
Justice?
we resolved, there are 2 judgments of NCT. The first, of which I was a part, where Chief Justice Deepak Mishra was the Chief Justice. That was NCT 1. The second, where I was the Chief Justice of India, which was the second. And now there is a third, which is pending before the Supreme Court, which of course will have to be dealt with by...
How does Washington DC resolve it? Isn't that also a similar kind of a situation?
You know, our distribution of legislative powers is very different.
They also have Maryland, Virginia state, and then they have that.
So it's like, it's very loosely, it is similar to a national capital territory, but the national capital territory which we have in the form of Delhi is governed by a very different constitutional distribution of powers. And the reason for it is, while Delhi was conferred with statehood, certain subjects which would have a bearing on, say, the national character of the NCT were reserved for the union, like police, land. These are 2 very critical areas which were, in that sense, reserved for the centre. By the Constitution itself, when the Constitution was amended to create the statehood for Delhi.
See, but the reason, when you say that we are not, it's like people have to expect more probably from our lawmakers. What happens is that now that we can see there's direct telecast, so we can see what's happening in the courts, people tend to expect it from the judiciary too. You get that?
Yeah.
So it's like it's when we started watching parliamentary proceedings,
Right.
when they became live, it was more like, oh, I know this guy. He's from my area. He's
Absolutely.
so somehow the mystique of that, the judiciary performing in some closed rooms, that's gone now. And then now you're looking at the lawyers and you say, he didn't represent me right.
Right.
Me in the sense citizen of India. So that's happening a lot. That's changing. But anyway, let me come to that later.